Okay, now some of what I'm going to talk about now you've already been introduced to, but now I'm going to start to give you a little bit more in-depth knowledge of it. So this next section, we want to talk about the core settings. What are the core settings for brushes? Obviously, things like Z-add, Z-sub, those are very important. So whatever you have in the shelf, we could say it's in the draw palette, but you're mostly going to know them from the shelf. So the shelf items are important. There's also the type of brush. Okay, there's the samples, modifiers, and depth. Those are the core settings. Everything else is a little bit less relevant. Shelf we already know about. We talked about that. The type we talked about. It's the algorithm, right? And the one that we've looked at before is the clay versus the standard brush. So let me ask you, what's this difference between the clay and the standard brush? Who remembers what the exact difference is between them? There's only one thing. Yeah, Peter's got it. Topology independence. That's the primary difference. And so what's different between all these other brushes? Let's start taking a look. So we know clay and standard, but what about standard and the elastic brush? Or what's different between the inflate brush and the magnify brush? In fact, if I feel like I need to cut this up a little bit. So there is the blob brush, there are the clay brushes, there are these clip brushes. You can just remove those from the equation. There's this curve bridge, which is a topology. Don't need to deal with that. Curve edit, curve left. These are just curve modes. Okay, we don't need to really talk about these guys right now. We do need Damien standard brush, deco elastic. There's a bunch of insert brushes. They're not terribly relevant for this algorithm equation per se. There's a bunch of mask brushes. There's a bunch of select stuff, some topology, transpose, there's trim. So even removing those, and let's get rid of the groom brushes. Those are for hair. I don't know, that looks like about 50% cut out. Even this way, there's still, what's this deco brush? What's displace? What's elastic? Flakes, flatten. So the only way that you are going to know if one of these brushes is an actual arch type versus some preset, the only way is literally hovering over it and see if the base type equals the name. So clay and clay. All right, that's an arch type. Blob, well, the base type is pump. Is there another brush out here that uses pump? I don't think so. But they called it blob, and I'll show you, because, well, it looks like blobs. So that name was better than base type, and I don't know why they named it pump, except for that it has a connection to the magnify brush in the way in which it pumps up the volume, or pumps up the volume of the form. Okay, clay buildup, that's not an arch type. Clay tubes, not an arch type. Move elastic. The arch type is move. Displace, that's an arch type. Displace curve, that's a preset. So you'll want to get familiar with what the actual arch types are. Inflate is an arch type. Magnify is an arch type. But you need to know them, but you can find them relatively quickly. And when you're talking to people, it's always a good thing to be able to say, okay, well, what's that brush type? Because, for example, clay and planar, exact same base type. But if we come in, select the clay brush, that's one behavior. You select the planar brush, totally different behavior. Very, very different. What's different between these two? That's going to be one of the things that we explore today. We're going to learn why that's different. It's more than just depth in this particular case.